All right, so the ayes have it, and we will be bringing this up to Executive Committee next week. And look who just joined us. Hi, Randy.
Hi, everybody.
So we just passed a resolution on the Uyghurs in China, so we're very, very excited about that. But again, we're so happy to have you here, all the work that you're doing. And we're very excited to have the discussion about your trip and Sharon's trip to Israel over the holiday weekend. And a lot of us have heard some of the comments that you've made on other calls, but we really haven't had a chance to put it all together. What's happening today with the new government, with the ongoing conflict in Gaza, on the streets of Israel, and here in the United States, particularly with some of our locals. So we're really looking forward to your firsthand observations, and I hope we have some time for comments and discussions after your remark. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Sure, and it's so good to see James Davis here, the new PSC president, and it's good to see Barbara here. And I think, James, you and I are supposed to get together at one point or another. Several PSC members, as you can imagine, have contacted me directly and about the resolutions, and I have encouraged them to engage with all of you. And the same is true in terms of UTLA. I want to actually start by not with my observations, but with kind of the letter that we sent to the ADL, which is essentially, I tried to do in that letter, basically putting forward what our kind of positions have been over the course of the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. The AFT has changed from being very much viewed as in the complete, do you mind, I'm going to put myself on, I know people put me on Spotlight, but I really hate it. So you guys can have me on Spotlight, but I'm going to put myself on, on gallery so I can see all of you. So I tried in that letter, which the ADL actually really hated, to basically put forward 3 things. Number one, our fight against hate obviously includes, as a national union, our fight against anti-Semitism. Unlike the ADL, Sharon and I often say this, Sharon is a professional Jew. Like, she works as a rabbi, she works as a professional Jew. I am not a professional Jew. I work as an advocate to fight all sorts of hatred and, and anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and the union itself works to fight all sorts of hatred, inclusive of anti-Semitism. But, it's, and just like when you see a spike in anti-Semitism, we have to do something about it. We see a spike in Asian American hate or hate against Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, we have to do something. We see the spike against, we see what the right wing is trying to do, which is essentially make race the issue in the 2022 election. In a really disgusting way, using CRT and using, and no doubt, it will roll out the crime issues at one point or another. But as a union, we fight against hate wherever and whenever we see it. And so answering their question about the fight against anti-Semitism, very important to do. But we don't do that in a vacuum. And that the second piece was that we actually also, when it comes to Israel and when it comes to Palestine and when it comes to Palestine, that what happens there, we fight against Palestinian oppression as well, just like we fight against other oppression. You just passed a resolution today on, what's happening in China and the fight against what's, and we've done that in this international committee any number of times. And so in that way, we take on and have taken on like what should happen in the Middle East. And I'm talking about it from a position as the AFT, not from the EI position, or not from the PSI position, which Jan has done for many, many, many years. And where we have gotten to as a union, and you see it in any number of different forums, and frankly, you know, I'm a very, very, very big believer in this from a lot of other vantage points as well, is engagement. And what has happened is that the left has frankly abandoned the left in Israel. And as a result, the left in Israel is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and doesn't have the kind of resources and the kind of help that it needs, frankly, from the American progressive communities to help do that work. And what we try to do, what I try to do, what the union tries to do with Hand in Hand, with the social education activists, with a bunch of others, is sorry, I don't know why Mark wants me. We try to do that kind of engagement strategy. And that is what EI tries to do now. And that's what we've tried to do for, you know, the last 10 years. Dan was on one of the trips that we took. It was a pretty, when we take trips now in terms of Israel and Palestine, we are very, very clear about the Israeli government's absolute, frankly, I think, deprivation of rights to Palestinians. But what we also hear when we talk to Palestinians in Ramallah, in East Jerusalem, and not in terms of the politics here, but when we talk to Palestinians, which the union does, Pat does, I do, we have lots and lots of connections in lots of different ways, is that they want peace and they want economic development. And they want to actually find ways to force the Israeli government to get to a peaceful solution and get those walls down. They don't want to have more boycotts, more sanctions. They don't want that. They want to find ways to pressure Israel to actually create the economic development and to stop the walls and to stop the occupation, but to actually have the kind of economic development that happened before the Intifada. And that is when you talk to non-political, regular Palestinian folks and Israeli folks, what they want is a kind of normalcy that economic growth and economic development and engagement would bring. Now, politically, that's not what you hear from the activists, because the extremes have now controlled this debate on all sides. And so, so in the ADL letter, we tried to actually kind of set out, this is what the Nationals' position is. We've been doing engagement. We actually have a resolution from 2016 with Hand in Hand that talks about engagement in that kind of way. I wanted Stav Shafir to be in our convention in 2016 so that she could actually present what the theory of the case was. And as you noticed, there were some activists who basically tried to shut her down and not let her speak. And that was overwhelmingly rejected. And people gave her a standing ovation afterwards. I think that people like Merav Michaeli and there's people in the new Israeli government who have some and will do some really progressive things. And I think that the Israeli society is actually ready for trying to figure out peace as opposed to war. I think that they have been pretty shaken up by the violence in the mixed cities. And I think that they've been pretty shaken up by the rockets. I didn't hear in our last trip the kind of, oh, I don't have to deal with any of these issues that I have heard in several of the other trips. So as I said, the ADL letter set out, we are against anti-Semitism. we believe as a national union in this engagement strategy as opposed to a BDS strategy. And that number three, but locals get to make decisions themselves and have real debate themselves. And I think as the PSC is starting to see in the debate that's now happening in places like Brooklyn College and Baruch and other places that I'm getting letters from, and I know UTLA, I think that there is a high likelihood that UTLA will reject the resolution. And what I have said and what I would actually fight for and be on the floor of a convention floor if it came to this, using my role as a delegate as opposed to my role as the president. I think that any resolution that we would pass needs to be done through the eyes and ears of people on the ground in Israel and Palestine. And we need to do something that is equally, that is a resolution that really actually talks about both sides and talks about a shared society, co-determination, and how do we get there? And how do we make sure that Palestinians have the civil rights to which they are entitled, not only a state, but the civil rights within Israel to which they are entitled? And how do we also make sure that Israeli society has the state to which it is entitled? And so that's kind of where we have positioned the union up till now. I know that I have a very intense personal relationship with Israel separate and apart from this. And, you know, I try to actually make sure that I check it to some extent. But our trip, let me get to our trip. Our trip was remarkable. Most of the time, the reason we initially went, the reason that I initially went was that Sharon is very much, for those who don't know, she's kind of like the grandmother of the gay movement in Israel. She was the head of, I mean, when she started as the rabbi of CBST in New York City, she started as the rabbi in the early 1990s during the time of AIDS. There was no other, she was the first out gay rabbi in the United States of America. And it was at a period of time when AIDS was still devastating the country. And a time when about a third of the members at CBST died of AIDS. And she was pretty renowned at that moment as a trailblazer. And she helped the Jerusalem Open House start. She helped some of the gay organizations start in Tel Aviv. And she has very deep connections with lots of people in the progressive left, and particularly in gay organizations in Israel. So when she has a tradition, which since we've been together, I have joined her with, that whenever there's an real crisis there, she really tries to show up for the progressive left. You got all these solidarity movements that show up for the right, but very few ever show up, except for, in some ways, J Street, for the progressive left. And people rely on her to do that. Over the course of the last 10 years, I've been doing that too with the Labor Party, with Hand in Hand and with others. And people really wanted us to get there. It's hard to get there. And we had to, Bougie Herzog, who is now is the incoming president of Israel, but he was at the Jewish Agency at the time, got us the permits to be able to get in. What I said to Sharon, though, was that I insisted that we would not go until after the ceasefire. I didn't want to go before that. But we were able to go, but I won that negotiation, but I didn't think we could get a permit beforehand either. So I had something in my back pocket. So but we got the permit, we went in, and we had an unbelievable trip. Meaning, normally, people are like, Americans, we're too busy, even you guys, even though we love you. You know, Israelis and Palestinians are like, they don't want performative art. And for those of you who don't know many Israelis and Palestinians, they don't deal with what we do in America, which is avoid conflict. They will tell you immediately how they feel, what they feel like. And if they don't want to see you, they will tell you they don't want to see you. This time, everybody wanted to see us. And in fact, by the time we when people realized that we were there, we didn't actually have a minute to ourselves Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. And what we saw from both the Palestinian side, and I'll go through a little bit of what we did, but what we saw from both the Palestinian side, we couldn't get into the West Bank because of the nature of when this was, but we did get into East Jerusalem. And we talked to business folk from East Jerusalem. We went to the Sheikh Jarash protests, which we wanted to do. We also did a Bibi protest, which is pretty unbelievable to actually then be in the Knesset, the parliament, the same day that the new government was actually kind of like Bennett made the statement that he was actually going to do the new government that night that we were there in the Knesset. And you could feel both the tension and the, all of the back and forth. And I don't know if anybody has seen the show Borgen, but it felt very reminiscent of Borgen and that show about how she became prime minister. It was really, it was a moment, but it was really quite something. And we're very close with both the Labor Party and the Meretz Party. We're also close with Ayman Odeh, but he was in Eilat, and so he couldn't get back. And so we didn't talk to Ayman, but he was the head of all of the kind of Palestinian parties, although one of the Palestinian parties, the Arab Islamists, actually went into the government. And Ayman also said that if they needed the votes of his party, they would have gotten the votes at the end so that the new government could hold. You notice that that they were able to hold by a 60-59 vote, the slimmest of margins a couple of weeks later. But this is what normally everybody is in. When you talk to anybody there, everybody's in their own place, their own tribes. They're right. Everybody else is wrong. There's nothing that's going to change. Nobody's going to make peace, and nothing changes. And I normally come back very depressed. This time, you saw a difference. And you saw, like, from the business folk in East Jerusalem, as much as they've gotten completely screwed by the Israeli government, they're like, you could see already that the American government was working with the Palestinians about what to do on Sheikh Jarash, what to do in terms of land, how to push to a different kind of relationship. And they were very grateful for that. And they were also wanted to talk about kind of tactics and strategies to engage the American government on both sides and to engage Democrats and Republicans on both sides and not just have this kind of Trumpian view about Israeli dynamics. And on the Israeli side, we still saw, particularly in Histadrut, some very, 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 very tunnel vision kind of views. But in lots of our conversations with lots of other people, including the Labor Party, including the people who are the head of Bert Belson, Rami Hood, and others who actually helped do the social policy for the Labor policy for the Labor Party. In talking to Meretz, in talking to the Women Against the War people, both close to or right by the Gaza border, and I would say most inspiringly, in talking to people at Hand in Hand, which we spent a morning with, there is a shift. And now in being there, I then understood why they could get rid of Netanyahu as prime minister. There is a shift. There's not a shift towards saying, let's negotiate a two-state solution. That's not there yet. But the shift is the status quo, which leads to more violence, more oppression, more blockades, more occupation. That's not a future that anybody on the Israeli side wants. And that shift was detectable this time. And that shift gave me a sense that engagement is really, really, really important. So that's, I could go through everybody we met with, I could go through all the kind of different conversations, but frankly, in Israel, they think that they have to engage. There's 20% of the Israeli population are Arabs. They're not going to engage in a boycott strategy. They need the jobs in Israel. They need to engage in that kind of way. So, whatever we do in terms of America, trying to figure out the pressure on all of this and trying to pressure for peace and for civil rights is something that I think we should do as a union. But if we, get to, but I would really push back against a BDS strategy, particularly given that the people that we talk to in Israel and in Palestine don't want it. And that's why you could see that even EI and the was very careful in this last resolution to avoid a BDS strategy. So that's kind of my report. I can do more and more and more, but I hope that that's sufficient.
That was amazing. Thank you, Randy. Your experiences and insight it's just really amazing. And you've given us a lot to, think about and work with. I just have a couple of comments, and then I'd love to open it up to everybody that if they have some questions. First of all, I have to say, I think it was about 4 years ago, we had a session at Teach with Hand in Hand. And I have to say, it's probably one of the best sessions I've ever been to. So I hope we will consider doing more and bringing them here so to expose them to everyone, because it really is just very, very special. The other thing I just wanted to comment on was I understand when you're talking about the divisions in labor, like with UTLA, I'm sure at PSI, 10 years ago passed a BDS policy resolution, and they have not implemented it. And I know the officers, Rosa and David, are feeling extraordinary pressure from affiliates around the world, especially with the recent attacks on Gaza. And, following the passage of PSI's BDS resolution, our Israelite union affiliates, UCAPSU, the largest union in Israel, withdrew from PSI. And I want to acknowledge and thank you for your continued attention to meet with them, even though your political associations are vastly different. And I look forward to working with you on how to navigate that through PSI. So, and with that, we have a lot of questions. I don't know if you want to comment before we start taking questions, Randy?
Well, I think, look, I think I completely understand the sentiment when you see the bombing that was seen about and the children that were killed, about the asymmetry of this. And it was completely Netanyahu's provocation to try to keep his job. But Netanyahu and Hamas are strange bedfellows that work together and fuel this crisis. And it is, and I'm not in the middle of this. And I think that criticism of Israel, as I said, you can see there is a lot of Jews that feel very under attack, and they really truly believe, I do not subscribe to this, but they really truly believe that any push for BDS is really an example of anti-Semitism. And there are people who push for BDS who are anti-Semitic, but a push for BDS is I don't subscribe to that notion. I understand why people would push for it, and people at PSI and other places did for reasons that on some levels made sense then, but what other people say, and I think it's also equally true, is that the kind of fight that should happen all over the world about discrimination and is very silent sometimes. And it tends to be reserved for Israel in terms of what happens. Now, I think Israel deserves the criticism right now, but it's been complicated in terms of PSI. EI had something very had something very similar to PSI right after the 2011 and 2012 and through 2013 confrontations, in which many children were killed as well. And EI danced around it in a different kind of way. And I think that in retrospect, Rosa would probably have wanted to do the EI approach, which is why they have never implemented it, but there will be, there will be a lot of pressure. Everyone in the region understands now that the way in which to try to deal is to try to find a way of engagement and to find a way that Hamas does not win the Palestinian Authority vote, so that you have essentially a terrorist organization running the Palestinian Authority. That is what East Jerusalem Palestinians are very, very, very afraid of, because they do not want a terrorist organization running the Palestinian Authority. So they have a corrupt organization now, and so I understand the pressures there and the tensions there, and I will also be much more careful, in my presentation to the board than I am right now. But I figured this is the International Committee, and so I also want, I know we are recording it, I want to be careful about the recordings that come out of this group, with all respect.
We appreciate that.
Thanks.
We have some hands raised. David, I think you were first. You're on mute, David.
David.
It's only been a year and a half. So thanks, Jen. Hi, Randy. Hi, everybody. So, like Randy, like many Jews, I have an emotional attachment to Israel. But like Randy, I also have an emotional attachment to human rights. And I think the letter, I remarked this to you, Randy, I think the letter you sent to Green, I thought his letter to you was totally uncalled for. And right. I think your letter to him was fantastic. Was just a great letter. And
let me just say, David, that UTLA really appreciated my letter to him. And good. That's part of what I was going for, to take some pressure off of them.
Great. So I had, as you kept talking, I had a couple of things I wanted to ask. So I'll just throw them out there for discussion. One, what do you think are the kinds of things that we as a union could do to play our part in helping to bring about a peaceful Israel-Palestinian, Jewish-Palestinian situation? And also, on your most recent comment, do you have a feel for the support among the Palestinian people for Hamas? Or is it what you mentioned about the Palestinians in East Jerusalem? Is that pretty much a widespread feeling among Palestinians towards Hamas?
If there was a vote today, Hamas would win.
Yeah.
Hamas is Netanyahu did this to survive. I mean, having the police walk into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, think the Kahanis won seats in the last Knesset. The Kahanis, Stav Shafir and others tried to get the American government to call them a terrorist organization, the Kahanis. And we could not get Trump, obviously, to do that. They stopped them from the last government, but they were able to run this. They were able to run this time. And so you have extremists on all sides, and people hate the current Palestinian people hate the current Abbas administration.
Mhm.
They think that they were weak. They think they can't do anything. And, you know, Israel, I would say that Netanyahu was the worst person about, he didn't want peace. Netanyahu
Right.
wants
Right.
a one state solution and you know and did not want peace and undermined anything that Abbas was doing. And so if there was an election now, the Hamas would be viewed as they were strong. They did all these rockets into Israel. Yes, there's the Iron Dome. Yes, there is not a equivalent situation. Yes, Palestinians, yes, Hamas, which runs Gaza, never put up bomb shelters, never did any of that stuff. But there is, you know, they are viewed right now as the victors of this last
Mhm.
war. And so they are viewed as, you know, freedom fighters. And everyone tells me that if there was an election right now, they would win as sending a message that would
Mhm.
send a message to Israel that we need to have peace. So, and frankly, that's what Netanyahu wanted, because Netanyahu wanted the same kind of fear that
Right.
Trump wouldn't hear there. So they actually, in some weird ways, work together because of you know, of what they do. And if you listen to, if you watch Hamas, for example, I'm sorry, if you go to Haaretz and kind of get,
Mhm.
not that Haaretz, there's lots of verbiage. There's lots of op-ed pieces in Haaretz about this,
Mhm.
on and on and on.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff.
Thank you. First, Randy, I'll start off by thanking you for inviting me the other night to the town hall and celebrating Pride Month. And I had this background ready to throw up, and then I realized it's a teletown hall, and does it go? So I want to start with a little thank you there. Second of all, before I get into my comments, my personal position is against BDS, and you're absolutely right. So the letter that you wrote, I want to thank you, from California. As you noted, the two locals that are dealing with this are in California, and we have been working with them. The letter I thought was great. Thank you, Pat and Eric, with working with me in California, working with Susan and UESF, and working with many people at UTLA, as that is still moving. The thing that, but Randy, you've responded to both in some emails that you've replied, as well as in the letter, which I think is absolutely the first thing that needs to be addressed, is we have a democratic process, and we cannot silence our members during this rank and file, or rank and file during this democratic process, whether we like it or not, like the positions or not. And sometimes we absolutely don't like these positions, but we have to have their voice, allow their voices to be heard, so that the majority and the right voices can correct that. So your strong statement to many people on that was much appreciated. And that's why CFT didn't necessarily step in with a strong hand and allowed UESF to pass a resolution that they felt comfortable to respond to it, as well as UTLA. The members in UTLA responded to it in UTLA as well. One of the things I'm learning, I would have to say a vast majority of our members probably don't know what's going on. I mean, what you just explained to this group is even, people that do know what's going on is even more information than that. And I think CFT, part of our social and racial justice, I want to look for an expansion. I mean, we're working with Philippe on the work that he's doing with the many threads, and we're kind of repeating that in California. But I think this is also an area that we need to be providing education to our members, as I think it is so important that we talk about all different oppressed communities, and this is an oppressed community, both sides of this, that we need to continue. As we talked about the China resolution and Muslims there. So I think that's an opportunity. I think David asked, what can we do to move forward? I think that is one. If AFT, I know you've done it in the past, continue to do that. But I know in CFT, we're going to have to be doing that, and going to be looking at AFT to help us with that. So with that, I just want to thank you for the assistance, for the enlightenment, for the education. And I know we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we get this corrected. And I will be working with UTLA to see what alternative motion that they can do and continue to work with. I know John Perez is working there, Juan, Cecily, and his others.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jeff.
I'll stop being so bright. There you go.
Thank you, Jeff. I mean, I have no, sometime this year, I think we should bring a delegation to Israel and Palestine because of this. I think we have to wait for a while, but we should bring a delegation. But I want to do it. I don't want to do it as a J Street. I clearly don't want to do it as a Jewish National Fund, whatever. But I want to wait till, things really calm down so that you don't need permission from the government to get in. I do want to say one thing about which you don't feel in America, but if you look, 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, and Jewish and anti-Semitism against Jews has been one of the longest going genocides in the world. And what Jews feel quite abandoned right now, in that, when we had 3 or 4, and I don't, as you can see, I get kicked by a lot of Jewish organizations very hard, and I think it's really stupid, and we've been starting to have some real conversations about what the hell are they doing. But there is a long-standing hatred to Jews, including, as you heard Eric talk to us about at the last council meeting. It is key to white supremacy, that and it is key touchstone in white supremacy. And so it's something that we don't talk about a lot, but it is something that is felt very, very deeply by Jews throughout the world, and feeling very much like this is, Israel is their land. That was what they got in the aftermath of the Holocaust, and that state has to be a sacrosanct Jewish state. And in some ways, Trump, by suggesting that every Jew in the United States had dual loyalty to Israel, in some ways, that in and of itself is anti-Semitic. But he attempted to polarize this in such a way, and the new Jewish government, the new Israel government, as weird as it is, one of the things it is trying to do is make Israel a bipartisan issue again, and not simply, and not seen through Trump's eyes. So I think you're going to see a whole bunch of people from Israel, including Merav Michaeli and Nitzan Horowitz and Ayman Odeh and others, come over to the United States to do this kind of touring here. And there will be people who we can invite to different forums to actually have discussions, including with Hand in Hand and things like that. Because, I don't want to be the maven on Israel-Palestinian relationships. I have a very deep commitment to a two-state solution and to a Jewish state there, but I have a deep commitment to Palestinian rights as well. And so it is viewed in the higher echelons, and I've told Stuart Applebaum this, in the higher echelons of the Jewish hierarchy, that he is viewed as the good Jew. This is why I don't want the recording going anywhere. And I am viewed as the bad Jew because of all of these, because I'm going to, and I told Stuart this, and we will at one point or another write an op-ed together to debunk this. But there's a lot of pressure that in Philippe, in NYSET, you see it in UTLA, I'm sure you're going to see it in PSC, UFT sees it as well. It's this red line, this bright line, that if you do any criticism of Israel, you are anti-Semitic. So I have violated that line. But the flip side is I have violated the line of saying that by saying that you know, that there, that I violated the other line in terms of Palestinian activists who believe that Israel should, you know, be boycotted right now. So I am violating both of those lines and get intensely personal hate mail from both of the extremes, and I get it all the time.
That's unfortunate.
Dan,
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Jan.
and then James.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. You know, actually, your last comment just kind of made me think of what I was wanting to say. And so, first of all, yes, I thought it was a great letter. I didn't see the original ADL letter or actually the UTLA reso or statement. I would like to see those things.
We sent them all to you
Okay, well then I missed
under
that.
either under my name or Tier's name,
Okay.
but you know, Pat can do the same again. We can
Yeah.
resend them.
Well, I thought it was very good. You know, you mentioned the trip a few years ago. I was on it with other people on this call too, to Israel, the delegation we did. And at that time, you know, I quite frankly, I went into it probably not as a supporter of BDS, but at least maybe a little bit more sympathetic to some of those arguments. And I came away and we went to PLO headquarters. You know, I never thought in my life as a child of the 70s, I would walk through a building with the giant, you know, mural of Yasser Arafat and guys with AK-47s there. We had great discussions with them, talked to Hannah Nashrawi, who, by the way, is a PhD from the University of Illinois in medieval English literature. But you know, we heard from Palestinians in civil society. We heard from people on the left, on the right. We heard from, you know, Arab Israelis, Jewish Israelis, who were to a person saying they don't want BDS because it's disengagement, because it ends up hurting the process. And those are people who still, like you said, hold out the hope for a two-state solution that's been done terrible damage by Bibi Netanyahu. So we came back from that, and I'm thinking this is great and maybe a little dicey. We're really pretty far left, and then of course you get back and, you know, I didn't get anything like what you got, but I got a share of that criticism from the left of like people saying, "How dare you?" So I think kudos to you. We're fortunate that that you, as an observant Jew, as the wife of the rabbi, you know, that you're willing to take a stand on this and engage on this and help us navigate our position through this. It's a good thing, and we have to, and I want to say that to you openly, protect you and surround you with the, you know, with the union spirit that we all have as we navigate this. It's a lot of unions are silent on this, you know, just want to avoid taking the position, and you don't do that, and I think therefore we don't do it. So I do think it would be good for you to take another delegation at some point when that's appropriate. And so the last thing I'll say is just a request is that, you know, I especially sort of in CTU, we all get buffeted by the BDS movement and the opponents of that. The more that you guys share, like when sharing what UTLA is doing, the more we can see those and hear, like your letter, see your letter, for instance, helps us in other states to navigate, you know, these currents.
James.
Thanks. And hello, everyone. It's good to meet you all. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Barbara let me know. So I didn't prepare anything for today, but in a way that's probably good. It's really good to hear, Randy, from you. I'm looking forward to sitting down with you and talking with you further. I just thought I would share a little bit about where things are at with CUNY and the PSC, and just say that, you know, there's a way in which this is new and like a flashpoint in our union, and then another way in which it's almost inevitable. Not that it had discussion came around in this specific way, but I mean, I was teaching at Brooklyn College 17 years before, you know, Barbara retired, and I came here as the president, and Brooklyn College, as you referenced, Randy, like so many other CUNY campuses, this is a conversation / conflict, that is under the surface and sometimes above the surface and everywhere in between. I have colleagues who write and speak publicly, critically about the Israeli state on all kinds of issues. And they, David Horowitz organization puts posters out on the campus attacking them as terrorists and terrorist sympathizers. Yeah. The Brooklyn College Students for Justice in Palestine group was attacked, for all kinds of stuff. We had an undercover NYPD right after 9/11, infiltrating, quite literally, it's not hyperbolic, that group. And so these are really very live tensions for many, many years for many of, many people at CUNY, students and faculty and professional staff. And so, the irony for those of us who are new and the new officer roles, myself included, is that the resolution that originally came forward to us was on the desks of Barbara and her sister officers during this transition. And it was an explicitly BDS resolution that said, and resolved that the PSC endorse boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And that greeted us, among other things like, return to work and all kinds of interesting things. We also had a strike authorization resolution to handle. So, but many.
What was it, your first week, James?
Never a dull moment. Randy, not first week, first day, first weekend, I was sitting down with the makers of the resolution. Yeah, so it's been interesting, but I will say that, I don't think for a minute that, that there's anything sort of like a foregone conclusion here. I think that the PSC that represents 30,000 workers in the CUNY system has a very diverse set of perspectives, including, I don't know what I think about this. That may be the largest segment, but there are very, very knowledgeable people and people who are very invested in the issue across the whole range of viewpoints. The problem that we encountered was that, first of all, we had to figure out how to make a vote at our delegate assembly not just be up or down on whether to endorse BDS, because that would circumvent the conversation with our members. And we felt as a leadership very strongly that if the organization was going to weigh in on something like that, well, my goodness, at first you have to speak with the members about it. And so our main attempt was to try to direct the discussion into the chapters, into the locals, into the members. We were partially successful, and I say partially because the resolution that emerged, and I think, the first Vice President, Andrea Vasquez, I think, Randy, she spoke to you.
She did, it was great.
Yeah, and, so some of this.
Wait, but let me also make sure that, James, you're not hearing any I hope you're not hearing any criticism by me about what happened here. I hope you're not, I don't want you to feel defensive at all in terms of what you did in terms of how you pushed it back to the chapters to have these discussions was pretty brilliant. So well, I just want to be clear. I was not criticizing.
And there's plenty of room for criticism. So even if you were, that would be okay. But just to say, no, and I hear that and I appreciate it. I don't know whether we handled it brilliantly. Actually, I'm not sure that we did, but where we are is that we have a resolution that, on the one hand, does say chapters in the fall will begin discussion, right, about how, as a union, we seek to influence the U.S. labor movement in relation to the U.S. government's relationship with Israel. Okay, the resolution, although itself does have extremely loaded language in it, that is, that's, I would say it's inflammatory, and it does also, delegates were very eager to have BDS language in a resolved clause, even though it doesn't say we endorse BDS. So all of that just to say that I think what we managed to do is to insist on a level of kind of rank and file democracy that wasn't there on the front end. But also we have some really, really tough conversations to facilitate and structure. And in a way, I'm glad that we have a higher ed academic calendar to prepare for this fall, because I think we have a lot of groundwork to do. And we have some reparative work to do in the fabric of the organization, not just among folks who feel that the resolution is anti-Semitic or is unfair in leaving out Hamas, et cetera, but also just in union process. And I think we took some hits on that, and that's been difficult. But again, all just to say, like, I wanted to just share that with this room in terms of taking stock of where I feel the PSC is at with this. And I hope we'll be in touch with many of you, locals and maybe in this room, about how best to have that conversation and hopefully to restore some sense of unity, or I won't go so far as to say comfort, because I think that would be an overstatement, but comfort that a union is a place that can have that conversation in a somewhat collegial way. So I think that's all that I wanted to share. I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk with you about it.
And welcome, James. So glad to have you here. Dan, you still have your hand up. Did you have another comment or question? Okay, then I will just ask Randy if she wants to close us out on this section.
I just appreciate being able to share this with you. I do think we have to. I think that two things are going to happen this summer. One is, or three things, and let's also, because it wasn't a surprise to me that I got slammed by groups of people. I mean, remember about 2 months ago, because I had the audacity to say that some Jews are part of the ownership class, I got slammed as anti-Semitic. And there is a very well-funded botherism movement in the United States. I want to add that attempts to, like, the Barry Weisses, the person who's now the head of Time Magazine or Newsweek, or there's a Brett Stevens. There is an intense botherism group that personally I find really just, they want to find anti-Semitism on the left wherever and whenever they can find it. And there's a lot of crosswinds here. This is the thing I worry about. And this is the only thing in the ADL letter that resonates with me personally. Those people that wear a yarmulke and get kicked and spit on. I mean, how do we fight to make sure that those kids are safe? Those people who I grew up in the suburbs. We were called kikes all the time. We had eggs thrown at our house. That's not knives, that's not guns, but there's a level of anti-Semitism that's real, and we need to make sure that the members in our union and the people we serve, we find a way that as we have this legitimate debate about how we also help Palestinians have real rights, that they don't feel like we have abandoned them. And that's the thing that pulls at me, not this level of conversation, but what happens walking down the streets of New York or the streets of LA. And when I listen, as I have, to Sharon and her progressive rabbi friends, I hear that angst in terms of them, because there's real anti-Semitism that is now just fueled or pretended to be justified by a gross, horrible Netanyahu government. And so that's, I just want us to make sure we hold that as we kind of have these real conversations, which I think locals will have across the country. I do think that if the motion in UTLA gets defeated, which I think it will get defeated over the summer, I think that that creates a very different plane for us to have a conversation about this. And I think it creates a way for us to have a real conversation about whether or not we want to engage or not engage in the region. In terms of EI, because I'm the co-chair of the Middle East and Me Committee, or the Middle East Committee, I constantly get pulled into this. But I think we as a union can make a decision about whether we engage like we are right now, engage more or engage less. And that's a decision, and that's a conversation, and that I would like to be led by your committee to help us guide that in terms of this. I'm perfectly happy to do, any of the, I would be guided by you. I can easily do, my own thing individually with Sharon and not do anything throughout the AFT. But if you want to, like Jan just said about hand in hand, which I do think is one of the most inspirational things, and they can teach us a lot about cultural competency and about dealing with how you hold two truths together at the same time. And it could teach us a lot about how we handle and how we are actually anti-racist in the United States. They know a lot about how to do these things. So doing that with the activists, we can do more of that. And they would appreciate and love our role. And we will be basically signaling to the rest of the labor movement what to do. The rest of the labor movement will take our lead one way or the other. Trumka, is constantly looking to me for direction about what to do here. And I don't think they should be silent, but, but they're being silent because they feel immobilized. So, but the bottom line is, I really would like to be guided by this committee in terms of what to do and how we navigate through all this stuff. And that'd be very helpful.
Thank you. We certainly have our work cut out for us, but I think, as you can tell, we're all ready to have those discussions and see where we can go. Thank you so much again, Randy.
Thanks.